There's one right there. Bob Jordan, sit right there.
Well, good evening.
Good evening. That's Randy's seat.
Thank you so much for coming. What a pleasure it is to meet with friends and meet new friends, see old friends. We're so glad you're here tonight. Sue and I are really honored to be a part of this dinner, along with our U.S. Senator, Claire McCaskill. And I'll tell you in a few minutes a little bit about how all this came to be. But I wanted first to introduce Larry Veach to you. Larry was the pastor of Bob's Church in Jefferson City for a number of years, and he's a great friend of the Priddy family. And so, Larry, if you would come up and offer a blessing, we would sure appreciate that.
Thank you, Clyde. I tried my best in Jefferson City, and I finally gave up on he asked me just a few moments ago if I had a powerful message, a powerful prayer for him. He needed all the help he could get. Well, I don't know if this will fit your bill. We'll take a shot. Would you pray? Pause with me. Gracious and generous God, we are gathered here in recognition of one who has been a presence throughout Missouri. Through his Across the White Missouri broadcast, he has taught us about our long history of our beloved state. With objectivity and fairness, he has kept us informed as to the work of our government. As a man of faith, he has been an example of integrity, honesty, and commitment to the truth. He's been a blessing to all of us, so it is fitting, O God, that we take a few moments to recall our shared memories and give thanks for all Bob has done for us and for our state. We know, O God, that you are the source of all of our blessings, including this meal that we are about to enjoy. In all of them, we can see your hand at work in our midst. Now, loving God, we thank you for this food and the sustenance it will provide. Amen. Amen.
We have a couple of statewide office holders that I feel like we need to acknowledge. One is Clint Zweifel. He's our state treasurer. I think Clint maybe has left. Clint, are you still in the room? Clint enjoyed us for the cocktail period, but then when it came time to eat, he left. Our Attorney General, however, is here, and Chris Coster, I'd like for you to stand and be recognized right over here. And our Chief Justice, the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court of Missouri, is Mary Rhodes Russell. Where are you, Mary? I would also like to acknowledge your husband, Jim. Jim Russell is one of my dear friends, and Jim was state legislator and very involved in Missouri agriculture through the years, and one of the great guys in our state, and I love him to death. And so glad you're here tonight, Jim. He just had rotator cuff surgery, so he's kind of under the weather, but he's here. Good news. Friends, enjoy your dinner. Tonight's dinner is hosted in part by Learfield Communications, and we're going to have the president of Learfield Communications, Greg Brown, bring a few comments for us, and so hurrying toward the front to do that. Greg wanted to be here tonight. Greg's a dear friend. We love him to death. But Greg, unfortunately, had some other business activities. Heaven only knows where, probably New York. But he did prepare this presentation, this little video piece, and so.
Well, good evening, everyone. Bob, Nancy, and honored guests. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm really sorry I can't be there with you in person, but my schedule wouldn't allow it. You know, Bob Priddy has been an integral part of our company, Learfield Communications, not only as an award-winning news director and founder of the Missouri Net, but also as a business partner and a leader within our organization. And he'll be sorely missed. And at the risk of making this sound a bit like a eulogy, let me tell you why. He's been a rock in our news operation. He's really set the standard by which responsible journalism is measured. His integrity and his commitment are absolutely beyond question. I know many of you are aware of Bob's amazing credentials. He's not only a gifted reporter and anchor, but he's also a fabulous storyteller and historian. He's chronicled the history of the state of Missouri and told the stories in a way that is both captivating and interesting, and that's truly a gift. And best of all, it's a gift that he's not kept to himself, but rather he shared it with us all. Our company motto is build the team, grow the company, and have fun. Bob has been a stalwart supporter of that mission in every possible way. I'm personally thankful for that, and all of us owe him a huge debt of gratitude for his contributions and his leadership over the years. Bob has set an example for all of us at Learfield. He's been dedicated to his craft, but also he has a heart for the people and the spirit of our organization. He's been an example of the hard work, the dedication, the loyalty, and the commitment that is an absolute requirement in all successful businesses. And those qualities are not just admirable traits for journalists and news reporters. Those are characteristics that are invaluable in any job, in any career, in any profession, for any company or organization. And we at Learfield had the privilege of benefiting from them for nearly his entire professional career. Of course, we have salespeople and we have accountants, business managers, technicians, and other professionals who have also benefited from the role Bob has played. We need, just as every community, every business, every organization needs, people who will stand up and be counted. People who can be counted on to stay until the job is done. Stay committed until the goals are reached. Remain enthusiastic about the work they are doing with the confidence that the work they are doing matters. It's needed and valuable, and that it's helping other people. Bob has always played that role at Learfield. We need, just as every organization needs, Bob Priddy type people who will carry out their duties with integrity and enthusiasm and professionalism every day, day in and day out. I should add that Bob has always been very talented at something else many of you probably already know. Eating. That's right. Good old-fashioned chowing down. You can usually tell what Bob had for lunch by just taking a quick glance at his necktie. His dry cleaning bill must be enormous. My apologies, Nancy, for him eating into your retirement savings for all of the dry cleaning bills. One thing is for sure, Ice Cream Fridays in the summer at Learfield will be a whole lot less expensive. Obviously, Bob, on a more serious note, you have been a great friend, and we will greatly miss you and your hearty chuckle. And we will forever be indebted to you for the role that you've played in making the Missouri Net one of the most trusted and relied upon news organizations anywhere. And for the role you've played in making Learfield a great place to work, and for making it the family it is today. Please don't be a stranger. You're more than welcome to come see us any day and every day you'd like, Bob, including Ice Cream Friday. Bob, we love you and will truly miss you. Thank you and good evening.
Well, thank you, Greg Brown. Appreciate those comments. A few months ago, I got a call from Claire McCaskill, and she said, Clyde, I've heard that Bob Priddy is retiring. And I said, yes, that's the plan. That's the thought. And she said, we need to throw him a party. And I said, that's a great idea. So that's how we got here tonight. Let's give her a hand. And you all know Claire. She's a wonderful lady. She is the lady that represents, one of two who represents us in the state, in the United States Capitol, in the Senate. And we're so glad you're here tonight, Claire. thank you for coming and for bringing some of your friends with you, and we're glad to have you here. Come on up.
Well, the first thing I want to do is disabuse Bob Priddy of the notion that I suggested this dinner because he has been soft on me. I want everyone to understand that I didn't suggest this dinner because Bob and I are friends. I don't know Bob's family. I don't know Bob's personal habits. I don't know what Bob likes to do on his time off, other than I understand he's a history buff because of his profile as it relates to history. And the reason I don't know all that is because he's a journalist. And I'm a politician. And if you're a journalist, then you don't make friends with politicians. You keep your distance because you have to be objective and you have to be willing to ask the question that you know is going to irritate them. Now, just so everyone understands, I, on behalf of the hundreds and hundreds of politicians that Bob Priddy has covered in Jefferson City, let me just say that while he may think we have been irritating, I can assure you, Bob Priddy, we all believe you have been irritating. As a young state representative, a very young state representative, in 1983, I went to Jefferson City, and I already recognized Bob Priddy's voice because I had been there as an intern in the mid-'70s when Bob Priddy was beginning to do his constant and inescapable coverage of everything that was happening in the Capitol in Jefferson City. I was afraid of Bob Priddy as a young legislator. I would go the other direction when I would see him walking down the hall, on the slim chance that he would be interested in talking to me. I was a freshman state representative. Now, I look back on that and realize how silly I was, because there's no way Bob Priddy wanted to talk to me as a freshman state representative. He had bigger fish to fry at that point. But I do remember, with a great deal of clarity, at the end of my second full session, when I had an evening on the last night of the session where there was important legislation that I was intimately involved with, that I was working on both ends of the hall until the bell rang. And it was hard. I was dealing with such characters as Harold Caskey and Dick Webster. I was dealing with such characters as Bud Barnes and some irascible folks that were difficult to get to agreement. And I finished, and we got everything done, and I was having one of those moments when, after all the silliness had ensued and the papers had flown, and I was walking off the floor, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Bob Priddy walked up to me with a microphone, and for the first time, he asked me a question, and actually came quasi-close to paying me a compliment. And the reason I remember it so much is because it was almost a compliment, but it wasn't, because he's a journalist, and he could never compliment me. But it was a moment that I realized that I had accomplished things that were meaningful because Bob Priddy wanted to talk to me. That is the kind of journalist he has been for many decades in Jefferson City. The state has no idea the service he has performed, the people that he has challenged, the check he has been on political power run amok in this state. And if you want to know the real way to make Bob Priddy mad, refuse to talk to him. Because then you've got trouble. He will forgive you a cheesy answer that doesn't really answer the question every once in a while. He will forgive you not knowing the answer to his question. What is unforgivable is to freeze out journalists who have a duty and an obligation to report to the people what is actually going on. So I say tonight, we need to salute this man, not because he's my friend and not because he's particularly nice, but rather because of this sentence, which have his two favorite words. That is, a journalist that will go down in history. Thank you, Bob.
Bob, there are so many people that want to talk about you, to bring comments to you, that we would be here until 2 a.m. if we allowed that to happen this evening. He said I had to stay out tomorrow, that's okay. But I don't want to spend that much time. So what we have done is put together a video of some friends who wanted to bring some thoughts to you. Some are here tonight, others are not, but we are going to show this video, and I hope everyone in the room is where they can see it. And Phil?
Bob, you're old enough to remember shows like This Is Your Life and Queen for a Day. This is something like that.
I'm sailing away, set an open course for the virgin sea.
Bob, I think it's ridiculous that you're retiring. You're much too young to do that. But if you're determined to do so, we at the School of Journalism want to wish you the best, and we want to thank you for all your years of service to the school, the many students you've helped introduce to the profession, and on your spectacular career.
Bob Priddy in 30 seconds. How can one possibly say all that needs to be said about Bob Priddy in 30 seconds? 1963, the year I came to Missouri, Bob graduated with a BJ. 2000, Alumni Association Faculty Alumni Award. 2002, Journalism Honor Medal winner. Second Missouri journalism grad to become chair of Radio Television News Directors Association. Bob was elected to 2 separate terms. Recipient of that organization's Distinguished Service Award. Atlatl thrower. Aspires to play the hammered dulcimer. Author of 5 books, authority on Missouri Capitol art, journalist, historian, storyteller, raconteur, that's the same as storyteller if you speak French, news director of the Missouri Net more than 35 years, college roommate of writer Ron Powers, legislative reporter officially recognized by the Missouri Senate last month for 40 years of service, Indy race car fan, faithful husband to Nancy, 47 years so far, proud father of 2, lead player in the successful move to bring cameras into Missouri's courtrooms, explorer, mapper, discoverer of ancient Indian ruins in the West, active member of his church, member of the Missouri Historical Society Board of Trustees. And I owe thanks to one of Bob's Across Our Wide Missouri books for tipping me off to the fact there were 2 men from Missouri who became President of the United States. More than 30 seconds? Probably. Clyde, don't you dare cut it.
News on the Missouri Net. I'm Brad Farrell.
I joined the Missouri Net team on May 4th, 1992. Bob Priddy had already been at the helm of the network for about 20 years. Bob had developed an approach to broadcast writing that simplified the tried and true Associated Press style.
Bob was not fond of staff reading AP wire copy, so he asked us to rewrite the stories that came across the wire, make them more conversational. I couldn't type a lick. It took me 10 minutes, 5 pieces of paper, and some awful language just to type a single sentence. Bob was not a good teacher, but he was an excellent leader. It took me a while to get the hang of things, but I did the best I could to emulate Bob's approach to writing.
To say Bob Priddy is one of my mentors is too vague. Bob was one of my teachers. He taught me how to write for radio, And by paying attention to his red marks on my story scripts every day, I learned from the best in the business.
Remember the lessons. It's never over 1,000 people. It's more than 1,000 people. And it's never completely destroyed. It's either destroyed or it's not destroyed.
One time somebody put "passed away" in their copy. And Bob Priddy said, "Young lady, we at the Missouri Net do not use "pass away." We do not use "go to our heavenly reward" or "see our maker." At the Missouri Net, we die.
Hello, Bob, John Rooney, and a happy retirement to you. And what better place to do a retirement tribute than a building or a stadium that's over 100 years old, and that's Wrigley Field. But I wanted to say congratulations on a great career at Missouri Net. You've been a great friend, and thanks so much for tricking or convincing Clyde Lear to hire me back in the mid-'70s. I had the good fortune of getting to know Charles Kuralt, Christopher Glenn, Dan Rather, and some others at CBS. And I'll tell you, you're as good, if not better, than all of those combined. You've been a great tribute, not only to the University of Missouri Journalism School, you have been able to chronicle the history of the state of Missouri while telling its story of the state capitol for many years. Have a great time tonight, and please come see us. I've been asking you to do that for 9 years now.
When I think of Bob Priddy, I think of the competition. We both have spent most of our careers in central Missouri, and only once in all those years have we been on the same team. I must confess that in between bouts of professional heartburn and distress, I have come to admire Bob for his integrity, his independence, the quality of his stories. He really has been a standard setter on those characteristics about journalism that are so essential for professional, high-quality journalism.
When I first started at Learfield, Clyde Lear asked me to oversee the renovation of the Capitol office for the Missouri Net at the Missouri Capitol. And there was only one thing that Clyde told me. He gave me a budget, and he told me, whatever you do, don't put a couch in there. I don't want Priddy sleeping. Well, I go back to the newsroom, and I tell Bob I've got the budget, ready to renovate the Capitol office, and Bob says, whatever you do, make sure there's a couch. I need to be able to rest when I'm covering the legislative session. Well, they went back and forth, and finally I went to Clyde and I said, Clyde, I know you own the company, but I got to live with him every day. Can we please have a couch? Finally, Clyde said, let Priddy have his couch.
I wanted to extend my sincere congratulations on your remarkable journalism career. The Senate press table will never be the same. How will they get along without all that snoring? Seriously, Missouri will miss your encyclopedic memory of history and your deep knowledge of state government. After all, how many reporters today can say they covered the inauguration of Governor Benjamin Gratz Brown?
I covered the House, Bob covered the Senate. We're working late at night in the Capitol office. Out of nowhere, Bob turns to me, gives his hands, he says, would you want to be anywhere else? Well, I could probably think of a couple places I'd have rather have been, but, that was the essence of Bob Priddy. Being at the center of everything that was going on in state government, in the legislature, and telling the public about it.
Bob is the consummate reporter. His writing is equal to his delivery in its absolute clarity and integrity. In a world of Ted Baxter's and Ron Burgundy's, Bob Priddy evokes Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow.
Today, as I listen to broadcast news, I recall Bob Priddy's high standards and time and again conclude that today's so-called journalists at the national level could learn a lot by embracing Bob's accurate, diligent, and unbiased approach to reporting news.
During his 40 or so years of leading the Missouri Net, there really has never been a credible challenge to our integrity. That is to say that our journalistic standards under Bob's watch have always been incredibly high. In fact, anyone who's ever really done any chirping about our coverage has usually been proven out to be someone who doesn't have a lot of ground to stand on. And that's really a testament to the kind of leadership and the kind of journalistic integrity that is really at the core of Bob Priddy. Now, let me also say something maybe sort of interesting about Bob's work environment. it's really actually more like his habitat, if you will. Bob has some interesting approaches to the way that, well, you know what? I'll show you. So welcome to Bob's work area. This is Bob's habitat. You'll notice that he has available to him newspapers from the last few weeks, because you never know when you're going to need to search for something. He has a special place he keeps his drink. We're going to have the people from NCIS come in and take a look at this with their special flashlights and see what sort of strange organisms are growing there. He also has a variety of, I'm sure, state documents that are always, readily at hand, because, well, it's just important to have things readily at hand.
I'm Bill Pollock, the sports director at Missouri Net. I've had the privilege to work alongside Bob every morning for the last 7 years. One thing that I've learned, he has a sweet tooth, and he has a strong affection for Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies, and he buys them by the box loads each year, and he keeps them stored away. He's got this secret area where he stores them, and every once in a while he likes to bring out a box to share with us. But I was concerned that some of the cookies that he was bringing out were a little old. Now, he assured me that everything was fine, but I had to make sure myself. I had to place a call to the Girl Scout headquarters in New York City.
Girl Scouts, I'm help you.
Yes, I have a question. This may seem a little odd, but we have a coworker who buys Thin Mints every year and has boxes. Has boxes that are from 2009. Are those cookies?
They're definitely no good.
No, they're
back then, the shelf life was 6 months. So if you have any cookies that do not have sell-by freeze date at September the 1st, 2013, they are no good. His cookies, I'm surprised they haven't disintegrated. Wow. I'm glad you guys just didn't chomp into them,
I think this is vintage 04.
I just want to say a very personal thank you. Thank you for getting me involved in RTDNA, actually RTNDA back then, many, many years ago, more than 25 to be exact. You helped me get started in this organization, and it's been just a great, great relationship. And I will always thank you and think of you for that. So again, on behalf of all of us at RTDNA, congratulations and have a great retirement.
Remember your days pitching softballs for the team sponsored by Oscar's Steakhouse? Those pitches of yours were softer than the questions you fired at politicians. I know, because I played left field and watched many of them sail over my head. But not all of them, Bob. Remember that night you stopped a screamer of a line drive with your face? That softball remade your features in such a way that few recognized you afterwards. Look closely at Bob's face today. You can still see the lace marks.
Bob, it has been such a pleasure to know you since I first met you at that RTNDA board meeting where I was being interviewed to become the president of the organization. That was the start of a friendship that was truly wonderful and that survived many conventions, board meetings, awards dinners, and times when we just got to kick back and enjoy ourselves. Congratulations, Bob, on a wonderful career and on all the service you've given to a profession you love. I hope you and Nancy have a wonderful retirement. All the best.
I will use your own foreword in your first book to finish this up. You dedicate it to your kids. You said that your kids, that for your children to whom history is a bore, certainly history is not a bore to you, but then you said in the next sentence some very profound words. Perhaps someday they will understand that I am their past and they are my future. Well, Bob, you are a huge part of Missouri Net's past and Learfield Communications' past. But more than that, you will always be a part of its future because of the discipline and the lessons that people will learn throughout its history. So I'm going to step back behind the camera where I am most comfortable. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful time.
Bob, I have great memories of the personal and professional time we have spent together. I treasure our friendship, and I wonder if someday you and I will man the corner infield positions on that great slow-pitch softball team in the sky. That would be my field of dreams. Now try not to drive Nancy crazy in your retirement.
I have trouble thinking about Learfield or MissouriNet without Bob Priddy. He has meant so much to me, meant so much to my career and so much to me personally as well. And Bob, from Tammy, Mackenzie, and I, to you and Nancy, have a great retirement. You've earned it. God bless you.
When I met Clyde Lear, he told me Bob Priddy was the only news director in the history of the Missouri Network, a title that still stands but is soon coming to an end. My first thought was, well, maybe nobody else wants the job. In retrospect, I learned that nobody else really could do the job. No one can write like Bob. I've never seen anyone pound a keyboard with more speed and accuracy than Bob. No one can give a tour of the state capitol like Bob, not even people who've worked there for years and years. For those of you who have never been to the state capitol, I encourage you to go see one of the state's great treasures. But before you step through any door, get a hold of Bob Priddy. Ask Bob to come over and give you a tour. Not only will you see one of the state's great treasures, you will also hear one of the state's great treasures.
Our good friend, Bob Priddy.
When Walter Cronkite was in the Capitol to have his bust unveiled, they had me speak, and there were several of us who spoke. And, well, of course, we're very complimentary of Walter, and when we got done, he got up and he said, I hope that you'll now join us in the procession to the cemetery. I'm not ready for that yet. Terry Gainey, if Terry were here, I would tell him that my necktie is clean. And it's a good thing it is, because it's a nice yellow necktie. So I hate to disappoint him. And Senator McCaskill, I don't remember that first interview. I do remember when you first came to the House. All of us guys up in the press gallery thought you were just about the hottest bagel. But I do remember one night, and maybe it's the night you're talking about. It was back when the legislature was still going until midnight. God, the best thing they ever did was decide to adjourn at 6 p.m. And I sat up there in the press gallery, and that night I watched 3 major bills come through on the last night. You had one of them, I think. And I think Annette Morgan had the other, and I think Karen McCarthy Benson might have had the third one. And And I realized as I watched things happen that night that I was watching history being made in the Missouri legislature. Because those were the only 3 major bills that were passed that night. And they were all handled and passed by women. And this was a huge, huge breakthrough in the glass ceiling in the General Assembly. And I think that might have been why I came down to talk to you. But I recognized right away what a significant event that was that night. I don't remember the specific bills. I just remember watching 3 women pass 3 significant bills on the last night of the legislative session. And I thought, I was sitting up there and I thought, I'm just watching history. And that's one of the things that I've had a chance to do, is watch a lot of history. And it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, you're right, we're not friends. We're business partners. We both have a role to play when it comes to government and politics and the citizenry. So I'm proud that we have been able to do that. Terry Gainey, my friend who started this whole thing, is out in Oregon visiting his grandchildren. Terry used to live just up the street from us. He was an outstanding reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and someone I had a lot of respect for until tonight. But he remains a good friend. And by the way, I understand there's a book being written about the biography of Carmen Castle. And when it comes out, I want the author to sign it. And so when I'm up here sometime and Terry's around, I'll have him do it. Dean Mills has already tried to retire once and it didn't work. And now he's trying it again. And I hope that he's not a model that I will follow. But in a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit about the School of Journalism and what it's been. And Mike Kramer, who's here and who was on the screen, I want to tell you a little story about Mike. Clyde Lear came to me one day and he said he didn't think the Missouri Net sounded very good. And he met this guy at the airport in St. Louis who had a tremendous voice. He was a guy who was a wire rope salesman at the time, I believe. I decided he needed to come to work for the Missouri Net. So he and I, Mike and I, sat down and had lunch or breakfast or something at the top of the round, under whatever name that hotel was that particular day. And Mike told me that he really hated politics and government. Oh, great. I went down and I told Clyde I didn't want him. And Clyde said, I already hired him. Of all the people who worked for the Missouri Net, and I think I've kept a list, and I meant to look at one recently, but it's probably been about 50 people who've been reporters full-time or part-time with us through the years. Nobody ever worked harder to become what we needed and what we wanted and what we had to have than Mike Kramer did. And by the time he left, I was very sorry to see him go, just because, number one, he'd become such a good friend, but number two, because he had worked so hard to be a reporter for the Missouri Net. And I always have appreciated Mike for that effort that he made. Very early on in the history of the Missouri Net, we got a job application from a kid at KLEX in Lexington, Missouri, a station that no longer exists. He was applying for a job in sports. We weren't doing sports at that time, other than to have the anchors read some capsule sports things during the 7 o'clock news. But I took this resume to Clyde, and I said, if we ever get around to doing sports, we need to take a look at this kid. And by the time we got around to doing sports, John Rooney had moved on to Pittsburgh, Kansas. And we got in touch with him, and he organized a campaign to come to work for us. We got letters from coaches at Pittsburgh State University in which they said, gosh, we don't want you to hire him, but if he has to go, he's probably going to a good place. And so we hired Rooney. And one of the treasured pieces of archival history we have at Learfield is a photograph of the year that John Rooney and Bob Costas both worked for us doing Missouri basketball games. And we have a picture of a young, skinny Rooney, relatively skinny Rooney, and a very young Bob Costas with Norm Stewart sitting between them. And it's one of our treasured photographs. Do you have that on your wall?
I do.
Those of you who come to our building sometime, go down to Clyde's office, whether he's there or not, and, which is most of the time. And you can look at that photograph, which is some real true history. But John Rooney was, I think, a real catch. Now about the cookies. I recognize that I am infamous for my Girl Scout cookies. Through the years, from time to time, I have parceled out a few to the staff when they deserve it. The fact that I have a 5-year supply of them under my desk is an indication of how hard they have to work to get a cookie. It's even worse than a pig getting an Oreo after the pig race. But I'm going to invite all of you tonight. There's a case of Thin Mints out here from 2007. We'll crack that open tonight, and all of you can have a Thin Mint or two. You saw on the video Clyde getting a Thin Mint out of a jar at the office. That was a 2008 Thin Mint. So 2007 is the oldest I've got. This is the most vintage Thin Mint I have. And everything else is going to be newer than that. I'm sorry, folks. So if you want some real, genuine, antique Thin Mints, this is your last chance. I have some people I want you to meet. First person I want you to meet is my wife, Nancy. Many of you have met her and know her, and she's sitting right down here. In this journalism world, sometimes it's rare for marriages to last. And in November, shortly before I retire, we will celebrate our 47th anniversary. That applause is more for her than for me. I have been married all these years to someone of unlimited tolerance, almost unlimited tolerance. Every now and then, she wonders where I've been, and I always tell her the capital. And most often that's true. But all of the time, all these years, when I have been doing all of this wonderful journalism stuff that has brought you here tonight, Nancy has been the one at home, raising the kids, mowing the lawn, making sure that there was a good, warm place for me to always come home to. And no matter where I've gone in this long career, whether it's been to Poland and Romania to teach people how to set up independent news operations after the Iron Curtain fell, or whether it's been to all the places that RTNDA, RTDNA has taken us throughout this country, or various other places. It's always, my home is always the place I most look forward to coming back to, and it's because of her. Now, the last few days, we've had guests in our house, Nancy's sister Sue and her husband Bob Clemmer from Michigan. They've been visiting with us, and they heard that there was going to be a free meal thrown here. And we took them through the prison today. And it was a lot of fun. If you haven't done one of the prison tours, those of you who are now living out of state, come back and take one of the prison tours. It's really very, very interesting. My daughter Elizabeth and her husband Tom are down here. They live in Columbia, and that means we should see them more often than we do. But we're very proud of them. Elizabeth has decided she wants to go back and get her MBA, much as her mother decided in kind of a midlife situation to go back and get an MBA. And I'm really proud of her for having the courage to do that and the commitment to stick with it, because it's not an easy thing to do. So she just got back from a summer in China studying abroad. So if you need to know anything about China, ask Elizabeth, she knows all about it. Our son Robert and his wife Joelle and our two granddaughters live in Longmont, Colorado. Robert's an airline pilot, and his scheduling is something that doesn't allow him to make firm commitments far enough in advance for him to be here tonight, but we're thinking of them. I would like to have everybody who has ever been a reporter for the Missouri Net stand up. Whoa. I wanted this to happen because we've been at this long enough that a lot of these people who have served the Missouri Net, who have built the Missouri Net, who have been the foundation and the structure and the sustainers of the Missouri Net, have worked at different times and have never seen one another or met one another. But you all have something very much in common, and that is that this has not been Bob Priddy's Missouri Net. This has been an organization that has been built and sustained. Our credibility and our reputation has been built and sustained by all of you who are here tonight, who ever sat down at a desk, wrote a story, did a newscast, worked for us in any way. So I am grateful that I have had the opportunity to work with such wonderful people as we have had on the staff at the Missouri Net. It has been a great pleasure, and we have had a lot of fun. We've worked a lot of long hours. We've had some rather nasty things to say about the people we have covered. All of whom deserve it. But we are, I think we're proud that we have, I think we're all proud that we have worked for an organization like this. We have people who are here who are part of the present Missouri Net News staff, and I assume they just stood up, but we have some present Missouri Net or Learfield employees, managers, handlers, or various bosses of one kind or another. Let's have the Learfield people stand up. Kay Henderson is from Radio Iowa. You often will see Kay Henderson on the national networks talking about Iowa politics. I always thought Iowa was a pretty boring place, but it seems to have a lot of politics going on. Kay is kind of the dead mother of Iowa politics, and we're so fortunate to have somebody like Kay as part of our family. She's an extraordinary resource, an extraordinary talent. Brent Martin used to be my managing editor for a long time, and now he's running our network in Nebraska. Brent, where are you? There he is. Brent is back over there. You have to understand that Brent is somewhat exhausted tonight because Brent leads Kansas City Royals blue. Occasionally Kansas City Chiefs red, but mostly Kansas City Royals blue. And so for the first time in 29 years, Brent Martin has a reason to stay up late. And he has been. And it's been very rewarding. But I miss Brent because he was such a good co-worker and such an excellent journalist, but I'm also exceptionally proud of him that he is our news director in Nebraska. Now, we also have been very fortunate for the last 40 years to work with another extraordinary group of journalists. I happen to think that they are the nation's elite reporters. And I am proud that the Missouri Net has been part of that group. But I would like all the people who are or have been members of the Capitol Press Corps to stand. people here, including two who were the Capitol Press Corps when the Missouri Net went on. Steve Forsythe from UPI, and T. Wayne Mitchell, who was with the Kansas City Star, the bureau chief of the Star. Forsythe is retired in Jefferson City. He and I have lunch occasionally. And T. Wayne Mitchell is a newspaper publisher in Mississippi. And I'm really honored that he came all the way up here for this. It's so good to see T. Wayne again. There are stories that I can tell you about T. Wayne, but I won't. But you'll have to buy the next Capitol book to see one of them. But I'm so pleased that we had the Capitol Press Corps here. And the reason I say they're among the nation's elite reporters is this. I happen to think that the people who cover our state capitals, the Missouri Capitol and the others, are vital links to the public in reporting on some of the most important issues that affect the way they live their lives. What goes on in Washington, Senator Caskell, you know, is kind of looked at as abstract by us folks out here, and frankly, you guys don't get anything done. But the state legislatures, every time they meet, are doing something that affects how we live our lives every single minute of the day. And their impact on us is immediate and profound, and the people who cover the state legislatures and state government, who work in the Capitol Press Corps throughout the country, are the ones who have a great burden to tell the people of their states what's going on and what's being done with them and for them and too often to them these days. And so the Capitol Press Corps carries a terrible big responsibility. There are fewer people covering state capitals today than there are reporters covering the United States House of Representatives in Washington. That is how critical Capitol reporters are. And to have had the opportunity to work with such outstanding reporters who have such outstanding credentials that they can be Capitol reporters to begin with has been a great honor and a great pleasure and a great joy to me. I graduated from the University of Missouri School of Journalism, as you noted. And while I was a student at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, when I was at home at Christmas time one year, my first year at J School, my mother came into the bedroom and said, "Did you have a Professor Phil Burke?" And I said, "Yeah, he was one of my teachers." And she said, "Well, Cam Wex just announced that he just died." And I had had Phil Burke for only a short amount of time, and I thought he was a terrific teacher. But the man who came in to replace Phil has been a friend of mine for all of the years since, and you saw him on one of the videos trying to summarize everything in 30 seconds. Rod Gillette came in, and I helped break in Rod at the School of Journalism, but he also was a great teacher to generations of people who came through the School of Journalism. And to me, more than that, he's been a great friend and has been a great role model for all of us as a professional journalist and as a journalist, as a human being. So I have a great amount of respect for Rod, and I'm so glad that he's here. And his lovely wife, Andy, is at home, but Nancy and I have always enjoyed being with Rod and Andy. And I'm so grateful that I had him as a teacher and as a mentor. Dean Mills is here, Roger Gaffney you saw on the screen. Some other folks from the School of Journalism are over here at this table, and I wish they would stand. And there's even one person from the Kansas University School of Journalism. But he's an NU grad. He used to work with Clyde and me at KLIK in Jefferson City. Bill Nelson is here from KU. So he's still one of us, even though he's slightly tainted. But the folks from the School of Journalism are over here. Clyde and I both can testify that the School of Journalism has been a wonderful thing in our lives, and we've gotten a few honors from them, but what they taught us and what they mean to us, I think, is more than just a few certificates and medals. And even today, we appreciate everything the School of Journalism was to us and still is to us today. My friend Gary Kramer from the State Historical Society is here. Gary is the head of the State Historical Society, and I'm now going to have far more time. I can just dash up there and go pouring through old newspapers and old magazines and things, and working with the Historical Society. We're looking for a lot of money to build a new building. And I know I'm probably speaking to a room of people that don't have a whole lot of money. So we'll take whatever you've got. And if you give us enough, we might name something for you. But I'm looking forward to working more closely with Harry too. On a warm spring day in April of 1959, a tour bus pulled up in the driveway of the state capitol. And students from the central Illinois town of Sullivan, who were seniors, got off. They were on their senior trip. Now, while most high schools take senior trips to Washington, or New York, or New Orleans, my high school went to the Lake of the Ozarks. But on the way back, we stopped at the Missouri Capitol. We went inside. I remember a guide took us into one of the side galleries of the House of Representatives, and then into this big room that had a painting all the way around it. That was 1959, and 7.5 years later, I found myself working in Jefferson City. And one of the first places I went to when I got some time to do it was go to the Capitol and find that room that had all the paintings in it. Later turned into a book, and then that later turned into an even bigger book. So that trip to the Capitol started a journey for me in 1959, and I'm still living that journey and still traveling that path. Now, 7 or 8 blocks away probably from the Capitol on that day when I first laid eyes on it, there was a high school freshman who was in the process of finishing his first year in high school. His name was Clyde. Neither one of us had the slightest idea the other person existed, and there was no reason we should know. But about 9 years later, I hired Clyde to work for me at KLIK. I hired him because he was a sharp young man, he was a good reporter, he was the kind of person who didn't want the status quo to remain, who felt that things could be better and people could make them better. Clyde had been hired by the Missouri Broadcasters Association. And his job was to go to the Capitol in the afternoon and go to the Associated Press office and get some copy from Larry Hall and George Sitterly, and then go to what they called a codophone, which was a telephone in which he could read his story with an out cue on it. And then radio stations throughout the state could call that number, and we would get a reported story for our afternoon newscast. This was back in the days when radio stations did afternoon newscasts. Back in the day when many radio stations did news, we'll just be honest. But anyway, so we Clyde with this voicer for our newscast. It was really advanced, except Clyde spoiled it because he decided more could be done. And he decided he'd do some interviews with people, and he put sound bites, or actualities we call them, on that codophone. Well, the Missouri broadcasters didn't want him to do that much, so they fired him. I just happened to have an opening in my news staff, and I hired Clyde Lear. And it was a happy partnership. Clyde was one of these people who was fearless. He once broke a story that caused a man to have a heart attack. Who didn't want the story to get out in the public yet. Clyde came up with the idea, this was back in the days when Jesus Christ Superstar was taking Broadway by storm. Clyde came up with the idea that we needed to get the Broadway cast album, which was 2 LPs. And we needed to play Jesus Christ Superstar one evening on the air, all the way through. And then we were going to do a live broadcast from the Central Motor Bank of a couple of panels of high school kids. One group from Highlias and one group from Jefferson City Senior High. And these high school kids were going to discuss Jesus Christ Superstar in terms of music and theology and other things. We had a hard-shell Baptist program director who was violently opposed to anything like this. Jesus Christ Superstar was somehow obscene in his eyes. Well, Clyde, as those of us who know Clyde, when Clyde gets an idea, get out of the way. And so we did this show. Clyde did this show. And we had this terrific discussion by these young people. And we got a lot of compliments on this kind of program. And so Clyde and I worked together very well. Clyde was the diplomat. And I was always a person who was more likely to go in and hit people head on. Mayor John Christie, who was then in his 70s, once told me he was so upset about something I reported that if he'd been 35 years older, he'd teach me a lesson. Or 35 years younger, he'd teach me a lesson. I was once thrown out of the Lincoln University Board of Curators meeting when I refused to turn off my tape recorder, which made big headlines above the fold of the paper the next day. One of the things Clyde was not good at was sports. Now, I've told stories about Clyde doing sportscasts, and I'm not going to repeat them for you tonight. But I'll tell you off the side if you'd like some other time. But, you know, one does not need to know the nomenclature to be an important and impressive figure in the world of sports. And all we have to do is look at where we are as Learfield Communications and all of the things we do with colleges and universities, coast to coast, 90 some of them, is a tribute to Clyde Lear, sports businessman, if not great sports announcer. So one day, Clyde and I were sitting at the desk in the newsroom at 410 East Capitol, building now gone. And he looked across at me. We were talking about a radio program called Missouri in Retrospect, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, Priddy, you ought to put this in a book." And I thought, yeah. And so I started making inquiries. And before long, we had 3 Across Our Wide Missouri books, which was the title of the program that moved over to the network that we were able to continue to put on the air, although we had to get into a lawsuit with the manager of KLIK. Clyde finally left me because $95 a week wasn't going very far in those days. I think I paid $150. And he went out and sold asphalt sealer. But at KLIK, he'd become good friends with the farm director down the hall from the newsroom by the name of Derry Brownfield. And Derry had a dream of doing some kind of farm broadcasts on a network hookup for stations throughout the state. Clyde had a dream because it was his master's degree project of setting up a state news network. And so, sometime after he left me, he and Derry kept talking. They put together what now is the Brownfield Network, which cost Derry the job at the radio station because the general manager there didn't much cotton to this idea of people walking behind his back, but they weren't really walking behind his back at all. He just carried grudges. And then a couple of years after that, Clyde called me up and said, basically, we can afford to set up a news department, a news network. Would you like to be the news director? And I moved immediately to that chance. I started work on November 1st, 1974. And I thought, for all these years of being the early morning man at KLIK, I was going to get to sleep in a little bit and then go to work at 8 o'clock. Except that was the week that Derry Brownfield went to Rome for the World Food Conference. So my first broadcasts for the company were farm news on the Brownfield Network while Derry was over in Rome. But we got along pretty well. And the next 2 months, we started setting up the network and telling people, hey, this is a new thing that's coming along. It's going to be a new approach. Some people thought it was a good idea, and some people disagreed. And we went on the air on January 2nd, 1974. Now, we hired 2 people, Jeff Smith, whom you saw here, who now is a retired Northwest Airlines vice president in Minneapolis. And it would be here, except he is working with an organization called Volunteers of America, and they're having a big conference in Indiana. And Chuck Morris, a young man we hired from KRKE in Albuquerque, New Mexico, after just covering a major prison riot. And so it was Chuck and Jeff and I. The Jefferson City Library was in the old Carnegie building, and they were selling out their property so they could move into the new building next door, and we bought this huge U-shaped desk that we thought would be just perfect for our studio. Our problem was our offices were on the 2nd floor of the KWOS building at 216 East McCarty, which was the top floor of the city's first funeral home. And to get up there, you had to get this big desk all the way up a fairly steep flight of stairs, make a short left turn, and then a short right turn to get into the office. And we had a big U, trying to force that thing into a small Z. And the 3 of us spent an entire day. We finally took that thing apart, and then we started breaking glue joints apart. until we could finally get it in and reassemble it there. But it took us the whole day, but it was a great bonding experience for all of us. But it was Jeff Smith who came up with the idea of making sure we did overnighter stories so the morning person would have something fresh. And it was Chuck Morris who came up with labeling stories as VA or VA, voice or actuality, or voice or actuality together. Those are still things that we do today, and it's things that we designate things today, but that's how it happened. We were the ones who established the Missouri Net at the Capitol. We were the ones who began to lay the groundwork. And all of you who have worked for us, and all of you who work for us now, you are continuing the work that we started 40 years ago. You are continuing, we hope, the commitment to professional journalism that we started 40 years ago. The focus for us has always been the story. Finding it, covering it, explaining it, because you see, it is the story that motivates the journalist. The story motivates the journalist, the good reporter. Seeing it, translating it, reporting it, moving on to the next story. I would note that curmudgeon in me requires that I do this, that in recent years, some of the joy of journalistic hunting and gathering has been diminished by the requirement that we spend a lot of our time in repertorial cut-chewing, where we do the story once and then we have to burp it up and redo it and put it over here on this platform and then burp it back up, redo it, put it over here on this platform. But the joy of the reporting continues to be the story. Getting the story, to find it, to see it, to tell about it. The daily excitement of getting the story of a new discovery has awaited me every morning when the alarm clock went off at 4:30. Discovering what it is, telling others about it, and at the end of the day, I like to say, what happens in the Missouri Net newsroom is something the scientists say cannot possibly happen. We start a day with nothing, and at the end of the day, we have made something out of nothing, and we call it news. And that's one of the great joys of being a reporter. I cannot think of anything I would rather have done in my life than to be a reporter. Forget whatever titles I might have had in the newsroom or in various organizations here and there. The title reporter, I think, is one of the greatest titles that a person can ever hope to have. And I was blessed more than 40 years ago to begin working with Clyde Lear, a journalist, a reporter himself, and I have been blessed by working with many fine reporters we've had on the staff of Missouri ever since. Most especially, I think, I've also been grateful of the various organizations I've been able to be part of, including the Radio, Television, Digital News Association. I've held some offices there, but that organization has given so much to me as a professional reporter. So I have been one of the most fortunate of people. I have been loved by a good woman, a good wife. I have seen wonderful children grow and form their own great families. To do what I think I was intended to do, I've been very blessed by that, and to make a good enough living that I can continue to do it and make these things happen and be able to report the things I see. It's the greatest thing in the world. I can't think of anything better. The Missouri Net has allowed me to do and be all of these things. And pats on the back tonight are certainly welcome. I appreciate them very much. But please understand that whatever it is that has elevated me to this status has not been achieved alone. It has been achieved through the work of a lot of other people. We didn't create a product to be marketed. We created a product, although it is and has been, which is okay. What we had was a mission to be fulfilled when we started the Missouri Net. Every day that mission has been renewed. It has been up to others to promote it, to sell it, and they've done pretty well with it, to turn our mission into the money that is necessary to finance us continuing our mission. That is how it began. That is how it has been. That is how I hope it continues to be. That has been the dividing line between news and sales. The sales department has never dictated to the news department anything about content, and never will. And it's a relationship that was forged very early on. It's been respected, and I am grateful for that. The mission was defined, really, a century ago for all of us by Walter Williams, who founded the School of Journalism that so many of us are part of. I first heard it as a student, and it appealed to my ideals as a young journalist. And it continues to appeal to me now more than 50 years after I first heard it. It is the reason I have often said that I am paid by the Missouri Net, but I work for the public. Walter Williams wrote this 100 years ago. I believe in the profession of journalism. I believe that the public journal is a public trust, that all connected with it are, to the full measure of their responsibility, trustees for the public, that acceptance of a lesser service than the public service is a betrayal of that trust. I believe that clear thinking and clear statement, accuracy and fairness are fundamental to good journalism. I believe that a journalist should write only what he holds in his heart to be true. I believe that suppression of the news for any consideration other than the welfare of society is indefensible. I believe that no one should write as a journalist what he would not say as a gentleman, that bribery by one's own pocketbook is as much to be avoided as bribery by the pocketbook of another, that individual responsibility may not be escaped by pleading another's instruction or another's dividends. I believe that advertising, news, and editorial columns should alike serve the best interest of readers, that a single standard of helpful truth and cleanness should prevail for all, that the supreme test of good journalism is the measure of its public service. I believe that the journalism which succeeds best and best deserves success, fears God and honors man, is stoutly independent, unmoved by pride of opinion or greed of power, constructive, tolerant, but never careless, self-controlled, patient, always respectful of its readers, but always unafraid, is quickly indignant at injustice, is unswayed by the appeal of privilege or the clamor of the mob, seeks to give every man a chance, and as far as law and honest wage and recognition of human brotherhood can make it so, an equal chance, is profoundly patriotic, while sincerely promoting international goodwill and cementing world comradeship, as a journal of humanity of and for today's world. I have a plaque at my desk that has that on it. I look at it every day. I've tried to be faithful to that mission, and with the support of those who have worked on the Missouri Net staff and with the support of a company management that has understood that Missouri Net is a trustee for the public, I think we have done well for 40 years. I like to think that those who founded and created and have sustained the Missouri Net have been faithful to that mission. I believe that being faithful to that mission has brought many of the personal and professional opportunities that all of us have had, and has produced the respect that I hope the Missouri Net has achieved. My hope is the Missouri Net will continue to be a good and faithful servant of those ideals, and doing so will influence others in our industry, particularly those who worship the golden calf of profits rather than the service to the public in whose hands the state and nation rest. When I was a young fellow in Illinois, according to girls, but not very often because I was kind of timid, there used to be a velvet-voiced guy on WGN radio in Chicago named Franklin McCormick, who would begin his Meisterbrow showcase each morning with part of a poem. Why do I love you? I love you not only for what you are, but for what I am when I am with you. I love you not only for what you have made of yourself, but for what you are making of me. That is how I feel tonight. I love all of you for what you are, and for what you have made of me. So I choose to think of this event less as a celebration of what I might have accomplished, and more of a celebration of all of the things that all of you have helped us become these last 4 decades, and I thank all of you for that. 25 years ago, our family took its last family vacation. Now, our family liked to hike up and down a lot of trails and explore a lot of things. Through the years, I've latched on to this hiking staff. And it has several badges on it that denote places where we have hiked. Mesa Verde, Mount Washington in New Hampshire. We hiked out of the Grand Canyon. We've hiked in the Great Smokies. We hiked the Split Rock Lighthouse in Minnesota. And on and on and on. In that trip in 1989, we took in a lot of sights. Glacier National Park, we got as far north as Glacier and crossed the line to Waterton Lake. And we hiked up a very steep trail where we could look out and see the lake and these incredible Canadian Rockies. And then down in the corner of our view was this picturesque old inn right on the lake. It's a view that I hope some of you would hike up to see someday. We saw the nation's largest jackalope. we saw the nation's largest freestanding brick smokestack. We visited the National Roller Skating Museum and Hall of Fame. We explored and hiked at Waterton Lake. As I said, we climbed that very steep path. On our way back, we stopped at the Little Bighorn. And we hiked down the trail down Medicine Tail Coulee, where Custer led his men in their raid. Then very soon they doubled back and we hiked the trail back up to what became Last Stand Hill. And when we got done with that, we got in the car and we headed off about 4 miles to the east to the Reno-Benteen battlefield, because that's where the other half of Custer's troops were. They weren't all killed in that fight in the valley. The other half was on a hill elsewhere in another battle. And we got there, and there was a trail from that battlefield down to the river that some of the soldiers grabbed the canteens during the height of the battle and dashed down to refill the canteens to provide water that they needed to drink or to wash wounds and take care of people. Several of them won the Medal of Honor. One of those cavalrymen is buried in California, Missouri. And so I wanted to go follow that trail down to the river, and the family just wouldn't get out of the car. Not even my devoted wife. They had been enough hiking. They had followed enough trails. They were going home and they were tired. No, it wasn't. But anyway, they were done hiking. They were done following trails. Well, that trail's still out there and it hasn't been hiked. It's going to be. I kind of look upon this retirement thing as exploring a new trail. People ask me what I'm going to do, and I tell them I'm more concerned with what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be getting up at 4:30 in the morning in the dead of winter when the streets are covered with ice and I'm the one that has to be in the newsroom. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to work holidays. I'm not going to work Saturdays. I'm not going to do overnighters. I'm not going to spend 80 hours in some weeks watching the Missouri Senate. So when people ask me what I'm going to do when I retire, I tell them there's a trail. And I'm going to take a hike. I don't know how long that trail is going to be. I don't know how many things are out there for me to discover. But there's going to be more badges on this state before we get done. And I'm excited about that adventure and that opportunity. I am intensely grateful for all of the work that you have done on behalf of the Missouri Net and all the work that was done tonight for this event. I am grateful to all of you, not for tonight, but for what you are when I have been with you and for what you have helped me with. Thank you very much.
so much, Bob. Claire, Sue, and I, and our friends at Learfield, particularly Greg Brown, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, and have a safe trip